Hello, my name is Bob McGlothlin, and recently wrote a book entitled Spiritual Warfare Basic Training. And I'm just going to read from the, the first session, okay, of this book, okay? The title of the first session is, What is Spiritual Warfare? Before we define spiritual warfare, we must understand that this warfare was already going on here on earth in the spiritual realm since the Garden of Eden in Genesis 3:1 through 15. But until we entered the fight ourselves, we were completely unaware of it. Spiritual warfare is fighting against the enemies of the souls of men, both visible and invisible. Our basic visible enemy that we see in the mirror each morning is our very own flesh. Up until we were born again, this flesh we live in controlled every aspect of our lives, and we are so accustomed to doing what it wants. It takes divine intervention at times to free us from its hold upon us. This is where fasting and self-denial comes in. Also, in the physical realm, we find another enemy called the world. Only the world which we see is being manipulated by our third enemy, Satan and his demons, fallen angels, which are invisible. Satan has built strongholds within varying cultures in this world whereby he believes he controls the direction and fate of nations. But then the devil is such a deceiver that he fell for his own deception. When we read the last book of the Bible, we discover who is really in control. Now, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, not knives, guns, or anything in this physical realm, yet they're mighty through God, through the pulling down of strongholds. That's 2 Corinthians 10, verse 4, and Ephesians 6 will list some of those weapons for us. Most of the battles we fight are waged in our mind, but there is yet another battleground to be aware of, which is our heart. Although some theologians believe them to be one and the same, while others consider them to be separate, distinct battlegrounds, I find myself of the latter persuasion, for if the mind was the only battlefield of the soul, then logic would be the best way to defeat our enemies. Most of the time, when we find ourselves between two decisions, we wage war between our thoughts that come through our mind and others that come through our heart. And this also represents the battle spoken of in the book of Romans, the flesh against the spirit and the spirit against the flesh, Romans 8:1 through 14. The Apostle Paul shares his own struggle with us in Romans 7:14 through 25, and shares that there are two laws at work in us that are born again, the law of God and the law of sin. There is a story that had once been told about a missionary that led an Indian chief to relationship with Jesus Christ. Later, the chief told the missionary, what about the war that had begun between the black dog, or spirit, and the white dog, or spirit? The missionary told him to feed the white dog and starve the black dog. The white dog represents the Holy Spirit, and the black dog, Satan, in this story. We need to feed our spirit man inside us and starve the carnal man, flesh, to help us win the war that wages inside of us. And let me read this quick poem. There are many strongholds, of which some do stand out, like the addiction to smoking, the drink, or being all drugged out. But there are some strongholds that are not quite as plain, like that of prejudice, pride, guilt, or shame. The stronghold of a grudge due to offenses unforgiven opens the door for hatred of whom that one's resenting. Strongholds are merely doorways that allow manipulation by demonic forces, attempts at intervention. So if one allows a stronghold to exist within his life, he should not be at all surprised when he endures consistent strife. Thank you for listening.